Hi, I'm Robert Greaves, and this is The Point. This week we're talking to Diana Wu David, the author of Future Proof, Work in the Age of Acceleration. She's going to talk about how executives, high-level executives, regular folks, can future-proof their careers as well as their personal lives. Thank you for being here, Diana.
Thank you very much, Robert. Great to be here.
Can you tell us, the audience, a little bit more about the background of the book and the core ideas behind it?
So, I spent the last 2+ decades helping companies manage disruption. And in Financial Times, we were inventing new businesses to manage our own disruption, one of which was board education. And after having many coffees with the folks that were in our board course, which were CEOs, some retired CEOs, people who have had their liquidity event and moved on to their board, and most of them said, look, I have been doing a very successful career and I've been managing disruption for my company, but I don't know how to manage it for myself. And so that was the sort of catalyst for the book. After my own experience managing disruption in consulting and in line management for companies, I realized that that was a huge aspect that needed to be addressed. And so I wrote the book Future Proof.
So I think a common trait for people who eventually feel burnout at work is that we often aren't aware of our own crises. Either we somehow convince ourselves to ignore the red flags or we just don't realize it. You, I think, have been through that stage. How can we be more mindful of our own problems, and what are the red flags we should pay attention to?
So McKinsey did a study of burnout once for their own employees because so many people were leaving, and they realized that there was a very high percentage of people who were leaving for burnout that had never taken any vacation days. They had lots of vacation days, but they'd never taken them. In fact, it was 100% of the people who were leaving. And so there's a lot of efforts to put policies in place, but now that's shifting to more inside and what you can train people to do to self-manage and to understand boundaries in an always-on culture. So I think that managers have a role to play in that respect, and certainly individuals in terms of having people to feed back to them or knowing when enough is enough, but also just in society, that sense of, what are we teaching people? What are we teaching our kids and the people coming into our firms in terms of what is the expectation for them?
So we're in Hong Kong, of course. Is there anything about Hong Kong? Is it more of a pressure cooker than other places? And if so, what is different about Hong Kong and work than, say, New York or London?
Well, I think that Hong Kong is a bit different because there is an expectation that you will be always on. And in my experience, in particular in multinationals, you have people who are driven to work hard. There is a culture of face time in Hong Kong, more, I would say, than in other places. There is a culture of pride that extends to not just your personal pride, but for your whole family. There's that added burden that I personally don't feel for my parents. And then there's the fact that it's a globalized world. So you can have your very tough work day, and then you go home and you get on a phone call with the US or London or somewhere else in the world. So you are perpetually working and always on, and there is no break.
So you've worked for Henry Kissinger, you've been an investor, an entrepreneur, you have Serrana Labs, your own consultancy. How do you manage it today? And you have a family as well, husband and kids. How do you manage all of this personally?
I try to focus on the important things so that I don't get mired in some of the little things. So getting out, Hong Kong is a gorgeous place. So last week, we've had so much turmoil and it's been very stressful, and we went out to Sai Kung and hiked up to the waterfall, and that kind of like the IV drip of Mother Nature refreshed everybody in the family. So being able to do that, going out and just enjoying each other's company is something that is, you know, what keeps me sane, I would say.
So one fascinating point in your book is that you say you give people a way to not only have peace of mind, but at the same time to actually be more competitive, resilient, while having a more enjoyable experience in the workplace. And that's very different from the books that I've read, the traditional assumption of taking a vacation, leaving your job behind, sacrificing your relevancy for short-term relaxation. So can you tell me a little bit more about that and how people can improve their own competence while not making huge sacrifices in life?
Yeah, well, those are my people, right? The ones that are completely type A. I only know this from experiencing it. And I think this moment in the future of work, people need to have that agility to manage disruption. So company lifespans are decreasing, our lifespans are increasing. We kind of got to pace ourselves across a 100-year life. And being able to really future pace yourself, decide what's really important, focus on that and the progress, but then also gather together a group of people, a network of people that can help you get to where you're going, and be there for the wins and the losses are really important. So we had structures in place that used to provide that in a less globalized world. Church and neighborhood and family, and some of that's not as possible. And so really having that network of people, professional loyalty is really horizontal now to your network. It's not about this nice slot in a company where you can just please your boss and go up and you have your colleagues. You have to work harder at it.
So it seems to me that what you just said is how one future-proofs their life. Is that correct? Is that the way? But you look at internet companies, you look at Silicon Valley, it seems like they're doing exactly the opposite. I mean, young people say they get burned out working for Facebook or Google. I mean, it seems like they're going in the opposite direction.
Yes, and I heard that, in your 40s, you feel like you're already washed up in Silicon Valley. I was on a panel for The Economist with a woman who is at one of the heads of Google. And she talked about how much they are trying to embed some of those values of not only not being always on, but perpetual beta. So they are now communicating to their teams, we want to keep iterating, but instead of being perfect every time, which I think is what we're taught in school, like the final product, here it is, they talk about how they can collaborate together, how they can share their preferences in terms of, look, I go to sleep at 10, so I don't want to be talking at 12 o'clock at night, but it's great, you can WhatsApp me. So that same thing that I talked about starting to develop skills to have boundaries for work, to communicate your technology preferences, to agree in principle or on guiding principles about, having a draft and not overworking when you don't need to. Those are all things that are happening in many companies, but I think led by some of the tech companies that have a fairly young staff that are very tech savvy and comfortable having those conversations and also using technology to enable that kind of work environment.
Interesting. So let's go back to the broadest of the broad scope. When should people start thinking about the future, future-proofing their lives? Should they be doing it when they're in university? Should they do it after they hit their first crisis? I mean, how should we think about this today?
Well, you're in, communications, and I think that we can both agree that waiting until you hit your first crisis or second is not a great idea. I teach my kids this already. I have kids in secondary school, and when they're making their decisions, just the other day, my daughter said, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And my teacher asked me, and I don't have an answer. And I said, you can't decide now, because in 10 years, when you get your first job, you are going to have a completely different environment. So you can choose what you like, and you can try to learn something and then reflect on it and reflect on, am I good at it? Do I like it? And then as you go along, you can create a mosaic of the work that you'd like to do, and it will change over time. So you can start now, I guess, is my answer.
Sounds good. So this show is called The Point. And we always like to end an episode with the interviewee summing up or giving us the main point. So if you take your book, Future Proofing Your Life, what is the main point you'd like to leave us with regarding your book?
I think that you can have a lot of optimism around the tech, the globalization, the demographics that are all drivers to disrupt the way we work. And by planning ahead, you can have fantastic work on your terms without any of the burnout. But it demands some attention.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Robert.
And that's The Point for this week. Please follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, and we'll continue. If you want to continue the dialogue, just drop us a line. Thank you.